Hi, it's Alistair at Electric Scotland. Doing my introduction for my weekly newsletter for July 13th, 2018. I will say that this has been quite an interesting week because obviously we've had the big new proposal from Theresa May and her cabinet about the Brexit negotiations. And we've seen David Davis, the Brexit negotiator, resign, and Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, has resigned, and a couple of vice chairs of the Conservative Party resigned. And on it goes, basically. There seems to be a balance in the press that the white paper that came out today is not good at all. And some people are even saying that Theresa May is a traitor to Britain and probably the worst Prime Minister we've ever had in our long history. I agree with that, I might add. I think she's terrible. I mean, we voted to leave, let's just leave, So, anyway. The other big story, of course, is Donald Trump with the NATO meetings, and obviously he's turned up in Britain today. So, there'll be a lot of news on that. Personally speaking, I like Donald Trump. I think he's a very good businessman. And I do agree with this fact that all NATO countries should pay in 2% of GDP towards defence. And Germany, the richest country in Europe, is at 1.3 and doesn't look like it's going to increase very much very soon, that's for sure. And I have to say Canada's come in for a bit of a stick because it's basically saying it's not going to meet 2% and never will. I think that bodes some real problems for Canada in the future, but we'll just have to see what goes. But I don't see why we should be asking America to subsidise the blinking NATO system, when basically the NATO countries tend to benefit enormously from NATO. So I think it's time that the other countries stood up and actually paid 2%. I mean, Britain pays 2%. Although Britain could really do with paying more like 2.5%, I think, because I think our armed forces are a bit weaker than they were, and we need to strengthen that. But anyway, these are the two big stories that are being covering in the press in quite some detail. And I dare say next week I'll tell you more about how Donald Trump got on in the UK. Okay, so I'm also reminding you that this is the season for Highland Games, and they're being taking place all through North America, Australia, New Zealand, and also in Europe and other places. So if you want a wee Scottish fix, maybe you find out if there's Highland Games somewhere in your area and maybe pop along and try some haggis and stuff, because usually they have some Scottish fare there that you can eat. And the other kind of major news from my point of view is that our community's gone down. If you go to our community, electricscotland.org, you'll get 500 internal server error. So I'm afraid our community's down at the moment, and I don't quite know when we're going to get it back up. To complicate things, Steve, who does all the technical support for me, has actually spent several days in hospital. And according to the doctor in the hospital, if he'd delayed about 2 hours more, he would have died. Apparently he was on the verge of kidney failure. He told me that because he had some problems in the US Navy, his joints are pretty bad and he really needs some surgery, but it's taking years for the Vets Association to sort these things out. And so the doctor prescribed, I think it was called Bufferin, which is a pain medicine. And he's been taking it for quite a number of years, but the doctor at the hospital said that it's a well-known side effect that it can have adverse effects on your kidneys. So he's no longer going to be taking Bufferin, looking for something else to help him now. So, but obviously having almost died, and apparently he had a rough time for the first day in hospital, and he's now back, but obviously we've got this problem, and he can't really work at it the way he would normally because he's still getting over the effects. So it might take a wee while to get it sorted out. Apparently there was a disk problem on the drive and we fixed it, but in fixing it it looks like we might have hit a program file. So Steve's saying he's reinstalling all the major PHP and MySQL programs, hoping that will fix the problem. If it doesn't, then it's obviously something more serious on the underlying program. But he was hoping to maybe get it fixed by today, but we'll just have to see how it goes on. But I will say that if we're not back up, I will eventually put the newsletter up when I get access back to it. But in the meantime, you can always download it from our newsletter menu on the site, which is a PDF format of the newsletter. So at least it'll still be available for you. Okay, so without further ado, here's the news stories I picked for you this week. First one is, we should positively think of a no-deal Brexit as the global option. It says, for 2 years we've been fed a diet of daily fear by those who wish to overturn the Brexit referendum result and keep us either in the EU in whole or attached via customs union and single market membership in perpetuity by being told that a no-deal Brexit would be a fearful conclusion. Well, that article kind of poo-poos that, so I thought you might wish to read that. The next thing I was pretty interested in is Africa's revolutionary new free trade area could lift millions out of poverty. And again, the reason for reading this is that being in the Commonwealth, a lot of the major African countries are also in the Commonwealth. So knowing where Africa could be going, that's not to say it will happen overnight, but they are heading in the right direction. And frankly, it says the African continent free trade areas will comprise 1.2 billion people and a cumulative GDP of 2.5 trillion. Prospects for African growth are better than ever as countries move away from socialism. And if you look at it, it's the same as the UK, because Jeremy Corbyn and his Labour Party are very much for going back to socialism, which has never worked, ever. You can look at history in many countries in the world, and you see socialism just hasn't worked at the end of the day. So I do think it's well worth reading that, because it puts into perspective about world trade again. The next story is how Theresa May is selling the Chequers proposal to Conservative MPs. It says, below is the full text of the letter Theresa May has sent to Conservative MPs in the immediate aftermath of the Chequers summit. So at least you get to read the letter. Then we've got the government's Chequers agreement from Canada plus 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 to Brexit minus minus minus. This is from Conservative Home. If no deal is better than a bad one, the sum of this policy is certainly a bad deal. Tory leavers now face a bleak choice. Then, because again Trump's coming to the UK, we've got Trump ready to offer zero tariff trade deals to make Brexit Britain boom. Donald Trump is ready to offer Theresa May a zero tariff trade deal to help get Brexit Britain booming, his ambassador has revealed. And again, if you consider the US is actually our largest trading partner and then it's the EU. So, whatever we can do with America is certainly going to be very important. And I do think working together, we can do a lot of things in the world, Then we've got the Chequers Cabinet conclusions and assessment. This is from Lawyers for Britain, and I followed up with the other one, which is the Chequers conclusion by Lawyers for Britain. So both these articles will give you another spin on the Chequers deal, which is terrible, I have to say. Then Western armies are losing their high-tech edge. When America goes to war, its soldiers, sailors and pilots typically have long been used to having a spectacular technological edge. Those days are ending fast. And again, you should kind of be aware of these things. Then, workboat launch signals new era of commercial shipbuilding on the River Clyde. A very positive news story, this. A new boat has been launched at Renfrew for the first time in more than 25 years as one company invests in a new era of commercial shipbuilding on the River Clyde. Really good story, that. European nations, not Trump, are undermining NATO. The wealthiest NATO allies have underspent, while the poorest have moved heaven and earth to meet the target. What Donald Trump should but won't say on his trip to Britain says together Britain and America can roll back the tide of anti-competitive market distortions which threaten the world. Again, it shows how working together, America and the UK, we can do amazing things, Advisors instruct and May obeys. By contrast, for today's government policy on Brexit, unelected advisors instruct and Theresa May meekly obeys. I mean, just a major indictment on May as a terrible Prime Minister. Then the McNanny state, it's time to challenge it. Frankly, this is I hope you would make a point of reading this because it really does make you think. As said, since the Scottish Parliament came into being in 1999, it has passed over 300 bills that have been given royal assent and are now the law of the land. That's the article, but it's only part of a major report that's been done, and I put a link to the full report, which I was quite amazed. A lot of it's to do with smoking, a lot to do with alcohol, minimum pricing and such, and I think it's really interesting. So I would hope you take time to have a read of that. The next story is Brexit is a case of lions led by donkeys. You can tell I'm really upset with the way Brexit's going. And then finally, Trump's ratings aren't great, but they could be far worse. They say with President Trump arriving on our shores today, what better time to take stock of what the public on both sides of the Atlantic really think of this one-man controversy generator. So anyway, there you go. These are the news stories I got for you this week. Then on to Electric Canadian. More of the usual, like I'm still doing the Engineering Journal. Slight change in format in this particular one. But some of the topics discussed are permanently frozen ground and foundation design. So this is obviously building in the far north. A new high-efficiency linear amplifier, gas turbine fundamentals, the winter temperature cycle of Theast, Lawrence and Waters. There's obituaries, news of the branches, industrial news, and a focus on irrigation. Canada's provinces, I've got the next volume up, which is volume 6, The Dominion, Political Evolution, Part 1. And the Mining Journal, this is the official organ of the Gold Miners Association. It's got a rename now, it's just called the Mining Journal. And so we've got this up. I've got the one up for 1993, which starts with an article on review of the gold mining industry of Nova Scotia in 1892. And two more stories. Wacusta, A Tale of the Pontiac, Conspiracy by Major Richardson, 1906. Again, quite interesting, that one. Memorial to William George McIntyre. I happened to spot it because obviously being a McIntyre I happened to notice this, but he was born in Clearwater in Manitoba on the 9th of June 1888 and he died at Vimy Ridge on the 9th of April 1917. So it's an interesting article, that. Canadian Corps operations during the year 1918. This is an interim report by the Lieutenant General Sir A.W. Curry, who was commanding the Canadian Corps at that time. And then 3 articles by Conrad Black. One is on immigration and the Supreme Court. Democrats are snookered. Resistance to the summer jobs nonsense is heating up. And nominating Amy Barrett would be political genius. So, Electric Scotland, continuing the Commonwealth of Australia. We've got up volume 19. Remember, there's 19 volumes on this one. This is 1831 to 1832 with Governor Burke. So we moved to a new governor at this time, and there's a bit of a background about him within these volumes. Sketch of the life of Dr. MacDonald. This is a significant Gaelic-speaking minister who also wrote poetry, and in this particular sketch is a couple of his Gaelic poems. So if you read Gaelic, you'll enjoy them. If you don't read Gaelic, you won't. Then I found a book, The Jacobite Lairds of Gask. It's by T. Kington Oliphant. So it's, and again, remember, it's Margaret Oliphant was a great songstress, and she was a big supporter of the Jacobites. So I think you might enjoy how I read that. I will say it's a bit faint, but if you max it on the screen, you'll probably read it okay. Colonel George Stewart and his wife Margaret Harris. This is not particularly Scottish, but as we have a Clan Stewart page, S-T-E-U-A-R-T by the way, I thought, well, I'll maybe just pop that up on the page as a link. So if you're a Stewart, then you might want to read that. Then I found an interesting about the conquest of a continent, or the expansion of races in America. And it's by Madison Grant. I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. I didn't read it all, I read a bit, and I thought, well, yeah, for some it might well be interesting. So I thought I'd put that up in our American section of the site. Then Best Newfangled Family Tree, we got in section 2 of the August 2018 issue. So that's bang up to date. Then I've got Memoir of Robert Herbert Story by his daughters. He was Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Glasgow, one of His Majesty's chaplains in Scotland. So this was published in 1909. Very, very nice story that. He was obviously most Scottish ministers were real characters, you know, in their day, and a lot of them did substantially good work for us as well. Then I found a book, Farm Implements and Farm Machinery and the Principles of the Construction and Use. It actually says, with simple and practical explanations of the laws of motion and force as applied to the farm, with 287 illustrations. So I thought, from the point of view of mechanization and stuff like that, I thought that would be an interesting book. It's actually from America, but clearly there's a lot of similarities between America and the UK, certainly back in those days, which was 1869. And then finally I've got The Lauder of Fountainhall Baronets. It's by Gregory Lauder Frost. He submitted this many years ago, but he's continued to do research, and he got in touch with me this week to say that there's a lot of errors in his original article with us, and he would like to correct it. So this is basically a major rewrite which corrects these errors that were in the page. And then for the story this week, I've produced the foreword to The McNanny State, How Scotland is Becoming a Puritan's Playpen. And this is the story I was telling you earlier about how it's going into smoking, and whether it's right to ban smoking, because they're now talking about if you've got public rented accommodation, you won't be allowed to smoke in your own home. And he goes on to talk about the named person scheme and alcohol minimum pricing, and showing there's really major issues with all of those things where we're not getting the full truth. And he's asking the question, do we really want the politicians to tell us how to live our lives? So, I started having a read, and actually I just kept reading it because to me it was, I was kind of amazed at some of the facts he was coming up with. So I hope you might enjoy reading that anyway, so we'll see how it goes. But I produced a link to the PDF file itself, and you can read the foreword to it. There's the story for this week. Okay, so that's it, and hopefully we'll get our community back soon. Just keep our fingers crossed, and we'll see how we get on with that. Okay, thanks for listening. As always, I'll put a link to the PDF newsletter in the description below, and if you click on that, you'll be able to have a read and get all the links to all these stories. So, hope you enjoy it. Look forward to talking to you. Cheers.